Hello and welcome back. So in this lesson we're going to look at the CSS position property. This is a property that controls how an HTML element is positioned or located relative to its neighbors. So I'll quickly run you through this starting HTML page. As you can see, we're using a div here. A div is a generic container element, and in this case we're containing 5 paragraphs which are siblings to each other, so the div is known as the parent and these are the children. The paragraphs have all been set up to have the same height and width of 50 by 100, and I've given them a class of normal to start with, and that's defined as having a position of static and a solid black border. So static is actually the default value for position, and if I just, for instance, remove this, you'll see there's no difference. There's no change to what's displayed on the right. The position is still static, it's just that I'm no longer explicitly stating it. But I'll put it back in to remind us of what the default value actually is. And again, the styling for the div, I've also explicitly said that the position is static. Again, I can remove this and it'll have no effect. The div is essentially just a nice big parent container. It's 300 by 300 with an orange border. And I've set up a few global values as well. I've said margin and padding are 0. I've said all text is aligned center and it's bold sans serif, so it's nice and easy to read. So with that we can get started, and the first thing I'm going to do is change the position value for the div. I'm going to change it from static to relative. And this works in conjunction with a couple of other properties. So if I say top is 50 pixels and left is 50 pixels, but it's been essentially drawn or offset away from its ordinary location. So position relative locates an element relative to its usual position. So it's sort of relative to itself. Now I'd like to examine position relative just a little bit further by changing the position of one of these paragraphs to also be relative, and to do that I've set up a class which can do that. So let me just copy that class in here. So as you can see, anything with this class will have a position of relative, and I've created a small offset and I'm changing the color as well to red. So let's go and apply this to the second paragraph and watch what happens when I change the class from normal to relative over here. In particular, watch what happens to the 3 paragraphs below when I change it. So here we are, 3, 2, 1, there we are. You can see that the paragraph number 2 moved 15 pixels down and to the right, but the other paragraphs were unaffected. And this is a crucial thing about relative positioning. We saw that when we changed the relative position of the div, all of the children, the 5 paragraphs, moved with it. But in the case of this paragraph, the siblings, and in particular the siblings following it, were unaffected by the relative positioning of this single paragraph. Okay, so next up is absolute positioning. And again, I have a class for this. And where relative positioning is positioning something relative to yourself, absolute positioning is positioning something relative to your ancestor. What's going to happen, it's going to look for the first ancestor it can find, which has itself been positioned, which means it's no longer position static. So in this case, happily, we have div set to position relative, so this will be a qualifying ancestor. And so when I change a paragraph so that it is using absolute positioning, it'll look for an ancestor, it will find div, and it will say, right, I'm going to position myself relative to that div. So if I say the top and left are 0, like this, it's going to locate itself at exactly the same place as the div. You can see with my mouse, this is the top left location of the div. And so when I assign a paragraph to have absolute positioning, it will also be located so its top left is at the same position. So let's go and do that. I'll actually change the fourth paragraph. So here we go, 3, 2, 1. And you can see that paragraph number 4 has jumped up and it's located itself relative to this positioned ancestor. Now let's go and change this. Let's say its top is no longer 0, it's 50 pixels, and left is 150 pixels. And now we can see that it's 50 pixels down and 150 pixels to the right of the ancestor. The other thing that is really interesting to notice is that unlike relative positioning, which didn't affect the siblings, when we moved paragraph number 4, paragraph number 5 jumped up to fill the space, so it genuinely disappeared. It was genuinely moved away rather than just redrawn in a slightly different location. Okay, so that's absolute positioning. There's one more that we need to cover, which is fixed positioning. And again, I have a class for this. And we'll see this has got a position fixed. And again, just for starters, I'll set the location to be 0. And fixed positioning is very similar to absolute positioning, except the ancestor it's going to choose is the body of the HTML page. So it's sort of also known as the viewport, but it's essentially this top left location up here. It will be positioned relative to this. So if I now change the class of paragraph number 5 to fixed like this, 3, 2, 1, you can see that it jumps up and adopts the body or the viewport as its parent and positions itself relative to this. So I can now say perhaps the top is 50, and I think this was 450. And as you can see, it's now put 450 to the right and 50 down from the origin of the page. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will bring the lesson to a close here, and I'll see you in the next.